We're all very organised this evening. The next item of business is a members' business debate on motion 2865 in the name of Richard Leonard on the 30th anniversary of the workers' occupation of the Caterpillar plant in Tannochside. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would ask those who wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons now. And I call on Richard Leonard to open the debate. Around 7 minutes, please, Mr Leonard.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. It's a great honour to serve the people as a member of this Parliament, and I can think of no greater honour than securing this, my very first members' debate in Parliament to mark the 30th anniversary of the Caterpillar occupation. Because we don't celebrate our history, Labour history, working class history nearly enough. And through this Parliament, I hope that we can remedy that. The story of the 103-day occupation, which began on the 14th of January 1987, carries with it many important lessons. And first and foremost, it reminds us that we make our own history. That history is not predetermined. And secondly, it reminds us that fundamental social, economic and political change will come about when injustice is challenged from below. And that challenge comes when working people have the confidence to reject the centuries-old indoctrination that there is no alternative and start at last to believe in themselves. So I'd like to begin by welcoming to Parliament today some of those working people who believed in themselves, who made history in a small corner of Lanarkshire, and in so doing, lit a flame which still burns brightly and inspires and guides many of us 3 decades later. So I'd especially like to welcome with us in the public gallery today the convener, John Brannan, without bunnet, but still with a gleam in his eye, and to John Gillan and Bob Burrows, central figures in the Joint Occupation Committee then and the Caterpillar Legacy Group now. And I'd also like to extend a welcome on behalf of the whole of this Parliament to the women and men who directly and indirectly took part in and supported the Caterpillar occupation, who have joined us this afternoon. Deputy Presiding Officer, if you want a chapter in our history which truly shows the value of trade unionism, of collective action and real solidarity, look no further than the actions of these brave workers who occupied the Caterpillar plant in 1987. And if you want a chapter in our history which truly shows the perils of a branch plant economy, an economy too dependent on foreign-owned multinationals, go and look at the actions of the Caterpillar Corporation in 1987. It was declared as a PWAF, a plant with a future, and yet within weeks the plant had no future. The company contrived a scorched earth policy and all 1,200 direct jobs were to go. It was a corporate strike of capital, no sign of a ballot. The workforce's response was immediate. They chose to gatecrash the company's press conference. They chose to padlock the gates of the factory. Most of all, they chose to fight. This was not an easy decision. We had had the miners' strike, the Wapping and Kinning Park lockout of the print workers in the preceding years. But as my friend the late Campbell Christie said in his foreword to Track Record Charlie Wolfson and John Foster's magnificent document of the occupation, it was, and I quote, a forceful reminder that if workers do not fight for themselves, nobody else will. And what solidarity was shown. The miners' welfare on Old Edinburgh Road ran a free soup and bread service day after day. Cash collections were held at football matches week after week. Shop stewards' committees and mass meetings were addressed by John Brannan, John Gillan, Frank Kelly and others the length and breadth of the country, in engineering shops, in shipyards, in factories across Scotland, but in factories in Manchester, Birmingham, Coventry and Liverpool too. Bob Burrows was instrumental in persuading Motherwell District Council to invoke Section 25 of the Housing Benefit Act to provide rent rebates, and Strathclyde Regional Council to provide assistance to mortgage lenders. And of course, the Caterpillar Women's Support Group, like the miners' wives before them, not there to make the tea, but to make the case for the occupation, to lobby Parliament, to organise the struggle beyond the factory gates. This was real solidarity, practical solidarity, never to be forgotten solidarity. So what are the enduring lessons of the occupation? It is, in my view, that the balance of power between labour and capital can be tipped in favour of labour. It is that industrial democracy can prevail and does work. It is that working people are not just born wage earners, but have the potential to manage and run industry themselves. It is also that the real division in society is not between Scotland and England. The real division, the decisive division, is between those who own the wealth and those who, through their hard work and endeavour, create the wealth. For me, the real test of this Parliament is what we make of the Caterpillar occupation. Can we rise to the challenge it throws at us? Can we learn the lessons that it sets? Because, make no mistake, the Caterpillar workers' action raises the fundamental question about who controls the economy and in whose interests. And so I suggest that we need to put democratic socialism on the agenda once more. We need an industrial policy which is not reliant on multinational corporations. We need to start planning our economy rather than leaving it to the market. We need to start promoting industrial democracy in place of industrial vandalism. And I, for one, would like to see an Industrial Reform Act following in the steps of the Land Reform Act passed by this Parliament. We should not underestimate the size of the task before us, but neither should we exaggerate it. I want to leave the final word in my opening remarks to John Brannan, who said at the conclusion of the occupation, "There was never any guarantee at the start we were going to win. Maybe we aren't successful, but we proved a stand can be made. Workers could unite. I think the tremendous support of the public wasn't on a judgment whether they thought we could win or lose. It was supporting guys who decided to have a go. Today, we do not look back with resignation, we look forward with hope. Let's keep that fighting spirit alive, that ray of hope that things can be different, and let's use this Parliament to forge the real change that working people need."
Can I request our visitors in the public gallery to hold off the show of appreciation to the end, and I'll allow time for that, if you don't mind. Thank you. And we now move to the open speeches of around 4 minutes, and I call Richard Lyle to be followed by James Kelly.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I begin this evening by thanking Richard Leonard for bringing this important issue to the Chamber, and also congratulate him on his tremendous speech. Welcome the opportunity to speak in a debate in this important and significant event that took place in my Uddingston and Bellshill constituency, or as it was known then, Motherwell North. I can also welcome those ex-Caterpillar workers who are in the gallery on being here today, and once again pay my tribute to them and all who took part in the Caterpillar sit-in. The Caterpillar plant in Tannockside in my constituency is one which enjoyed a successful heyday, from its opening in 1956 to its peak employment of 2,700 people. It was a site that was well known within our community. Indeed, it was one that enjoyed royal approval, as I recall Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and the Duke of Edinburgh visited the site in July of 1962 during a visit to Lanarkshire at that time. As Mr Leonard has stated, on the 14th of January 1987, the Caterpillar factory sit-in began, with managers at the site being locked out by the hard-working and committed workers. This action, as was stated in Mr Leonard's speech, was supported by the community, especially supported, I'm reminded, supported by all in the community, including one little girl who broke her piggy bank and came along and handed in £5 in loose coin for the fund to support the workers, amongst the others who done the teas and the soup kitchens. It was a message that was announced change of the plan by the company's executives that of That of absolute closure of the plant, no investment as it has been promised, was not going to take place, and this wasn't going to be taken lightly. The workers sat in for 103 days before their occupation ended on Sunday, 26th of April, after Caterpillar obtained an eviction order. But not before the world had looked on as workers fought back against executives who had treated them with disdain. Indeed, from the sit-in came the famous Pink Panther, the workers' campaign tractor, which had been built and taken to George Square. It truly captured the public's imagination and became a symbol of the struggle of the workers of Caterpillar. Indeed, there were many characters and faces which were involved in the Caterpillar sit-in. I remember, of course, one, Jimmy Hamilton MP, who represented Motherwell North at the time, not only for the contribution he made during the Caterpillar sit-in, when he told the Commons that he was absolutely flabbergasted at the news, but also because I recalled standing for the SNP against Jimmy Hamilton in the 1983 general election, where I was the first North Lanarkshire SNP general election candidate to retain their deposit in such an election. I actually came fourth out of 4 candidates. I do hope the Chamber don't mind me reflecting on that political nostalgia in this debate. Of course, escaping nostalgia and coming to recent years, Presiding Officer, there has rightly been work done to recognise the contribution of the Caterpillar workers within our community. From the 25th anniversary reunion, which took place and planted the seed by the former workers who attended, to build a memorial to the factory and the occupation, which has subsequently came to fruition. Now, every time I drive from a surgery in View Park to other surgery venues, I pass by the memorial to the workers, and I'm very proud to represent a constituency with a story like this to tell. Indeed, it cannot be understated that the workers at the Caterpillar site are not only a true testament to the effectiveness that workers can have in employing direct action to highlight their issue, but indeed that the workers at Caterpillar have shown that in standing up together, they could galvanise not only their colleagues' support, but instill that same desire to stand up for what is right by so many in the community, who also joined them in their action of fairness. Can I say that due to other commitments long-standing tonight, I may only be able to attend for a short time at the reception that Richard Leonard, and I've told him earlier, is having. But I want to end my contribution by saying I recognise the efforts made by the workers of the Caterpillar factory, who are rightly paid tribute today in this debate. Every one of them deserves our tribute today.
I call James Kelly to be followed by Margaret Mitchell.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I first of all start by congratulating my colleague Richard Leonard on securing this very important debate commemorating the 30-year anniversary of the work-in at Caterpillar, and also congratulate Mr Leonard on a very strong and passionate speech, which I'm sure will have been welcomed by the representatives in the gallery from that work-in, and it's glad to see so many of them have made the journey through to Holyrood here tonight. I do remember I remember the issue well, having grown up in Halfway, just a couple of miles from Tannockside, and it's true that it was not only an issue that resonated throughout Lanarkshire, but the workers took their case throughout Scotland. In fact, I can remember as a young Labour Party activist attending a fringe meeting at the Scottish Labour Party conference that the Caterpillar workers had organised up in Perth, and been very impressed by the commitment and the passion shown by the speakers from the workforce. And I think it is worth recognising indeed what a remarkable story it is, because you think back, it was a real kick in the teeth to the workforce when initially they'd been told there was going to be a £62.5 million investment in the plant. And that, that obviously at that time gave the community great hope. And then to commit such a U-turn and to change their mind and to close the plant was a real hammer blow. And as Richard Leonard pointed out, this came at a time when retrograde actions were being taken against trade unions on the back of legislation introduced by the Thatcher government. and it made it more difficult for trade unions to stand up and take action. But bearing in mind all those circumstances, they embarked on that 103-day working, with great dedication, commitment and dignity. And I think we would all do well to recognise and celebrate the solidarity that they showed. And indeed, on the day that unemployment has risen in Scotland, what they were showing also was the importance of work. A lot of these men amongst the 1,200 and women had been used to the dignity of work, how important it was to their lives, how important it was in their community. And they were taking a stand not only to save the plant, but to say that they recognised the importance of that employment. I think it also is important not only to celebrate the history of the event, but also, as Richard Leonard says, look at the lessons for today. And I think one of the key points from that are that trade unions matter. You need that collective organisation that brings workers together, because indeed, if we do stand together as one force, we're stronger. And as was shown back in 1987, that strong, united, committed voice, made such a strong case that reverberated throughout Scotland and beyond. I think it also shows the importance of having an industrial strategy. One of the sad things when you reflect back on Lanarkshire in the 80s was you saw the closures not only in Tannockside but in places like the Hoover in Cambuslang, and also the reduction in the number of people working in the steelworks. In Scotland, we still have a proud industrial heritage. We have many graduates leaving our universities who are skilled in engineering, and I think we need to recommit to that industrial strategy, not only to show that we can have the cutting edge to produce an economy that's fit for the 21st century, but to give meaningful work to the men and women of this country, and to ensure that the dignity that was exemplified by the Caterpillar workforce can once again be brought forward in Scotland in 2017.
I call Margaret Mitchell to be followed by Elaine Smith.
Deputy Presiding Officer, I welcome the opportunity to participate in this debate on the 30th anniversary of the Caterpillar occupation, and I thank Richard Leonard for tabling this motion and also congratulating him on securing his very first members' debate on this issue. Any factory closure is usually a matter of great sadness for the management, the workforce, suppliers and the local community. When the news of a closure is preceded by an announcement of a substantial new investment programme, which is started and then abruptly cancelled, that must surely be a matter of more than sadness. It is a matter of outrage involving justifiable accusations of rank bad faith. That is, in essence, the experience of the Caterpillar factory at Tannockside, Unningston. These are the words of the then Conservative MP for Strathkelvin and Bearsden, Michael Hirst, when he spoke in the House of Commons debate on the Caterpillar tractor's closure on the 28th of January 1987. The House of Commons debate was held in response to the following developments. In January 1987, the 1,200 workforce at the Caterpillar plant in Tannockside came back from the Christmas break to discover that the £62.5 million proposed investment and expansion announced only months earlier was not only being abandoned, but the plant itself was to close. This despite the management and workforce having cooperated and responded positively to the many challenges that the automotive industry had faced, including competition from the Japanese technological advance and world economic and market conditions. The US company's explanation for the decision was that the losses it was experiencing worldwide due to the Japanese competition and a contracting market meant that the plant at Tannockside was no longer sustainable. This closure explanation was, with justification, questioned, coming as it did so soon after the major investment programme planned for the factory. The closure was a huge blow to the loyal and cooperative workforce, the company's suppliers and subcontractors, the local community and the UK government, who had pledged substantial assistance. The response from the workers was to stage a sit-in. Although legally they were prevented from continuing to make tractors and bulldozers, the workers kept the plant open by occupying it for 103 days. During this time, they succeeded in raising awareness of their plight around the world. And as a consequence, a deal was secured that ensured no compulsory redundancies were to be made and enhanced severance packages were to be awarded. Today, the site of the former Caterpillar factory is occupied by both housing and Tannochside Business Park, and sadly, closures of businesses located there still happen. The latest being the announcement of the closure of the branch of QuickFit Insurance, which has 521 employees. But here's the difference. When this closure was first announced, a huge effort was made to try and secure a takeover of the QuickFit call centre by another company as a going concern. Now this has proved not possible. Ageas, the parent company, has had to take the difficult decision to close the site and is now concentrating on doing everything in its power to help the workforce find new employment and or to reskill. It is therefore encouraging that over 1,800 job vacancies with local as well as national companies have been identified. But Deputy Presiding Officer, today's debate is testament to the fact that lessons can be learned from the past, including the value of open lines of communication between workers and management and the need for maximum support for the affected workforce when closures, as they inevitably will continue to be, are announced.
Elaine Smith, followed by Ross Greer.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I also thank Richard Leonard for bringing this important anniversary to our attention with an excellent speech in the Chamber this evening. I would also like to add my own welcome to the veterans of the industrial action who are here today with us, but also to remember those that are no longer with us. Caterpillar, as we've heard, came to Tannochside in 1956, and the jobs they brought were vitally important to local people. And for those of us who live in Lanarkshire, I'm sure we will all have friends, family or neighbours who worked in the Caterpillar. North Lanarkshire Labour Councillor Bob Burrows is one such worker. Bob was a shop steward and he was one of the former workers who also organised a memorial at the site, which was previously mentioned by my colleague Richard Leonard. And I think it's awful that that memorial was vandalised, but perhaps that's testament to the fact that there are people in our community who no longer remember or have been told this story of a local solidarity. Bob retrained as a debt counsellor and he went on to become an elected member, and he said the Caterpillar occupation changed everyone's life. All of the men and women who took part in this 103-day occupation to save jobs 30 years ago are examples of the power of workers' struggle, the importance of solidarity and the need for a labour and trade union movement. They didn't keep the plant open, but as we have heard, they did win a better settlement. And it's vital to remember their struggle and that of all workers who withdraw their labour or take action in other sometimes innovative ways for a greater cause. But workers' ultimate bargaining power is their ability to withdraw their labour and stop production. And to do this, workers must fight as a class. And other historic examples of class solidarity, like the Caterpillar occupation, are Upper Clyde shipbuilders work in the Lee Jeans occupation. Presiding Officer, the women of Lee Jeans did win their fight. And Helen Monaghan, who was at the forefront, said at the start, we didn't know when we occupied the factory where the help would come from, but we hadn't long to find out. Without the support of trade unionists, we wouldn't have lasted this long, and with your continued support, we'll keep fighting. And my old friend and comrade Jimmy Reid, former shop steward at UCS, in his most famous address said, reject the insidious pressures in society that would blunt your critical faculties to all that is happening around you, that would caution silence in the face of injustice, lest you jeopardise your chance of promotion and self-advancement. That's how it starts, and before you know where you are, you're a fully paid up member of the Rat Pack. The price is too high. It entails the loss of your dignity and human spirit, or as Christ put it, what does it profit a man if he gain the whole world and suffer the loss of his soul? Presiding Officer, the Caterpillar workers might not have won, but they are an inspiration in the way they fought for their jobs, their community and indeed their very dignity. That spirit of resistance, solidarity and community is the spirit that helped to create democracy itself in this country, to advance workers' rights and build the very party that I am a member of. Many councillors, MSPs and MPs over the years owe their opportunity to be heard to the efforts of those who campaigned and battled against unfair practices and an unequal society. We stand on the shoulders of men and women like those in the gallery today, and we must never forget that. However, unfortunately, many people in Lanarkshire are still fighting for their very existence, facing unemployment, on zero-hours contracts, inadequate benefits with no secure home and depending on food banks. And that is not the legacy that our working-class trade union ancestors wanted for our area. We must look to examples like the Caterpillar struggle to push us on for a new struggle, but it's much the same as the one we have always fought, standing up to injustice and greed of those at the top and demanding equality and fairness for ordinary working people. That's the cause of Labour, and once again I applaud Richard Leonard for bringing this issue to the Scottish Parliament's attention.
I call Ross Greer to be followed by Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'd like to thank Richard Leonard for giving us the opportunity this evening to remember the Caterpillar plant occupation 30 years ago and to celebrate the history of workers in Scotland and around the world who organise and fight together as a movement. It's fantastic that we have veterans of the occupation here with us in Parliament today. Preserving and promoting the history of the labour movement is essential if we are to be capable of winning the fights yet to come. The 103-day occupation at the Tannockside plant symbolised a generation of workers unwilling to stand aside as their jobs and their communities were destroyed by deindustrialisation in Scotland and across these islands. The story of what Caterpillar management said to the shop stewards when they announced the closure shows quite starkly what a cruel and dysfunctional capitalist system we were subject to then, as we are now. The plant manager said to the union committee, "The company has a problem, and you are a victim of the remedy." I only know about this, though, because I read it in the Daily Record. And I only know about the occupation because I'm a trade unionist and I'm active in left-wing politics. This was not the history that I was taught at school. And why not? If we expect our young people to grow up with an understanding of the society they live in, of its history, of its defining moments, then why do young people in Scotland, in West and Central Scotland in particular, not learn about the radical history of the labour movement in our communities? I don't object to having learned about the wars of independence, the Second World War or the Jacobite Rebellion, but surely I and other young people would have understood just as much, if not more, of the Scotland that we live in today if we'd been told about Red Clydeside, about Maxton, Maclean and Gallagher, the Battle of George Square, which we'll soon celebrate the centenary of, or the Upper Clyde shipyards working. It's taken Herculean effort just to get a statue for Mary Barber and her rent strikers. This is the history of a nation and a class, and it is something that all of our young people should know. I've been inspired by the work of the Caterpillar Legacy Project, and I hope that their exhibition will make it to communities in my region of the west of Scotland. We must get the message across to new generations of workers that fighting together is far better than being exploited alone. The trade union movement in Scotland has a proud history, but we must be determined to build a winning future. As the nature of work changes, so must the tactics of the trade union movement. With more people than ever, particularly young people, being exploited by zero-hours contracts and shocking conditions, most notably in the hospitality sector and for large employers like Amazon, JJB and Sports Direct, the Better Than Zero campaign, launched by the Scottish Trade Union Congress's Youth Committee, has not only shown that union campaigning can actually be fun, it's shown that it gets results. After a series of direct actions and consistent pressure on the G1 group, followed by negotiations with campaigners, the Better Than Zero campaign has won an end to zero-hours contracts, an end to the charging for uniforms and training, a new fairer tips policies, and a number of other improvements. It's now G1 management's responsibility to live up to their promise, but they know that if they don't, their venues will once again be shut down by workers demanding respect. This is a new generation of activism within the trade union movement. It's young workers fighting for their rights because the generations that came before, including the Caterpillar workers, showed us that it's a fight worth having, and I thank them for that.
Just before I call Liam Kerr, due to the numbers of members still wishing to speak in this debate, I'm happy to accept a motion under Rule 8.14.3 that the debate to be extended by up to 30 minutes, and I would invite Richard Leonard to move the motion. Thank you, Mr Leonard. Are we all agreed? Agreed. Good. Therefore, we extend the debate, and I call Liam Kerr, to be followed by Pauline McNeill.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'd like, first of all, to congratulate Richard Leonard on securing this member's business debate today, and I too welcome the many workers to this chamber. There are periods and events in history that are indelibly seared in our collective subconscious, famous battles, dates, places, events that make us the nation that we are. But it is right that we remind ourselves of perhaps less widely recalled events which are of equal importance in our nation's story, and I echo Richard Leonard's comments at the outset in this regard, and dare I say, Ross Greer does make a very important and valid point about history. That won't happen too often, will it? So that's what we do today as we look back 30 years and recall the workers' occupation at the Caterpillar plant at Tannochside. There, the workers' sit-in represented a seminal moment for those involved, their families, and the community in which they lived. And it is right to pay tribute to the courageous stance of the workers, but also to recognise the support of the union movement at the time and those who supported them, including, of course, famously the school children who donated their pocket money to pay for bus fares. And the decision of Caterpillar to announce the closure of the plant just months after announcing a £62.5 million investment in new equipment does seem to show, in the words of the then Conservative MP for Strathkelvin and Bearsden, Michael Hurst, gross incompetence in the planning of their corporate strategic objectives. And James, or as Richard Lyle maybe tell me, Jimmy Hamilton, the then Labour MP for Motherwell North, was so disbelieving that he said of the shop steward that had told him the news that they must have been going stark raving bonkers. Now, unfortunately, incompetent or not, bonkers or not, the plant at Tannochside did eventually close some 103 days after being occupied by the workers. Now, as the motion also demands, this anniversary serves to remind us of the value of workers standing together in the common interest. And when there are genuine concerns about jobs, health and safety and the general public, it is right that the government listens to the trade unions when they raise these issues. Richard Leonard asked the question, what have we learned? And I hope the Scottish Government learns to listen, and listen hard to the TSSA, who warned just last week of the folly that merging British Transport Police with Police Scotland would be, potentially causing big delays for travellers, lasting damage. Yes, I'll take an intervention.
Neil Finlay.
Thanks for taking an intervention, Mr Kerr. Maybe you'll now put on the record, given that you're expressing such care for working people, an apology for your government at Westminster bringing in the pernicious trade union bill.
Liam Kerr.
I thank the member for the intervention. I do think in the spirit of what I'm trying to put forward here, that's a little bit pernicious. The Trade Union Act has been brought in. It's not really relevant today to what we're trying to do. I think Richard Leonard brought a very important motion here, and I wanted to speak on it. But look, the Trade Union Act does aim to rebalance the interests of all with a freedom to strike. It is a sensible move. It is reasonable. And that is what that government, that democratically elected government, has put forward. But I want to talk about the Scottish Government listening to the TSSA, to the Scottish Labour, to Scottish Conservatives, and not go forward with merging the British Transport Police with Police Scotland. The RMT, the TSSA and ASLEF have publicly opposed this when it was first mooted, and the TSA's General Secretary, Manuel Cortes, said the SNP leadership know nothing about the practicalities.
Come to a close, please, Mr Kerr.
Please do.
Yes, Deputy Presiding Officer. So as we stand here remembering the actions of the past, let us not be blind to the present. The SNP should listen to the unions, the Scottish Conservatives, the BTP, Scottish Labour and above all the public, and stop meddling with the British Transport Police. Please. 30 seconds.
No, I'm sorry, Mr Kerr. Can I remind members that the spirit of members' debates is that you stick to the terms of the motion?
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer.
And I call Pauline McNeill to be followed by Claire Hawkey.
Presiding Officer, I'd like to begin by congratulating Richard Leonard on this first members' debate, but also by thanking him, because I think that this has been an important point in history to congratulate the achievements of the working movement, of the Caterpillar workers and their communities. And it does have some relevance to current day. Because that community didn't only fight for their jobs, they fought for their community. And as other speakers have said passionately, it mobilised a community probably in a way that none of us had ever really seen before. My father-in-law, Patrick Cahill, was a worker in the Caterpillar plant. And it always amused me how he used to say that he was, thought it was unbelievable that post the Caterpillar occupation that people were wearing the Caterpillar fashion, and he said, I used to wear those boots to my work. I don't know why you think it's a fashion. But the ingenuity of the campaign is the thing that struck me. I remember at one Labour Party conference when I was a student, a friend of mine came dressed as a Pink Panther, and it was my first recollection of the dispute when I asked him why he was dressed like that. He was obviously drawing attention to the pink tractor. And don't underestimate the significance of a mainly male workforce painting a tractor pink at the time, but it was really quite ingenious. I'm proud to say that there was an important Glasgow connection, as there was to every other city, not just in Scotland, but it was an internationally recognised occupation as people raised funds to support the workers who were in occupation. But as Margaret Mitchell and many others have quoted Michael Hirst at the time, who not only said it was best gross incompetence, but he said it was at worst corporate treachery. I never thought I'd hear that from a Tory. But what it showed you is at the time, the whole country felt the devastation of a promise of investment to be reneged upon by a corporate power. But this members' debate tonight is also an opportunity to celebrate the achievements of workers and organised labour and trade unions and the right to resist. And I do think there is a relevance to the current day. As Elaine Smith said, there were achievements, many achievements of this occupation and campaign, enhanced redundancy packages, which is, I think, an area for our employment law right now when many workers do not get even basic employment rights when their jobs are made redundant, not to mention poor packages. But the living wage, the minimum wage, the right to be in a union, the right to be represented are all achievements of the trade union movement that we have the benefit of today. But the voice of an organised workforce is an absolutely legitimate voice, not just in an industrial setting, but in influencing decisions in public service. And this is the point I would make to Liam Kerr. If you believe in challenging power, wherever power comes from, then you must believe in the legitimate voice of the trade union to do that. And the RMT have got a difficult fight on their hands right now, but there are 49 Tory MPs who want to restrict the right to strike for people in public services. What I'd say to you is this. Now, notwithstanding, there should be provisions that trade unions have to take in order to go on strike. They don't do it lightly. Would you only trust the view of the executive powers to decide whether our railways are safe or not, or our public services are safe? I think if you believe in a democracy, then the voices of everyone is really important, and I think it's a dangerous road to go down. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, I think there's a lot to thank the community around the Caterpillar occupation for what they achieved then, what they brought now, and I'm really pleased to be supporting Richard Leonard's debate tonight, and I know there'll be some celebration afterwards, perhaps a chance to talk to John Brannan and others about their many achievements. Thank you.
I call Claire Hawkey to be followed by Neil Findlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. May I start by thanking Richard Leonard for bringing forward this motion and giving us the opportunity to mark the 30th anniversary of this notable event in recent Scottish trade union history. A history, as Richard Leonard stated in his speech, we do not celebrate enough. The Caterpillar plant in Uddingston drew its workforce from across Glasgow, Lanarkshire and beyond, and its closure would have had a significant effect on workers from my own constituency at the time. Whilst the aim of the Caterpillar workers to save their plant and jobs was ultimately not realised, their actions in occupying their place of work in the face of global corporate disdain for them was a lesson in solidarity and determination. Like the Upper Clyde shipbuilders 15 years earlier, they were determined that their right to work would not be prized from them easily or without a fight. And whilst ultimately unsuccessful, there is much to be admired in the spirit shown by the Caterpillar workers in refusing to be ignored and disrespected, and I particularly welcome them to the Chamber and to the gallery today. By 1987, the industrial and manufacturing base of Scotland and the UK and my community was being systematically eroded under the supervision of a Tory government dismissive of the concerns of the communities involved. As with the miners' strike, as has been referenced by other speakers in the debate earlier in the decade, little or no consideration was given to what would replace long-standing industries that faced forced reorganisation or technical restructuring and was taking the food out of the mouths of children I went to school with at the time. The aim of the Thatcher government and their global corporate friends was to erode the influence of trade unions and their ability to organise. And by the time of the Caterpillar occupation, mainly as the result of the policies of the Tories at the time, trade union membership had fallen by 28% from its post-war peak of 12.2 million to 8.8 million and was to decline further. Notwithstanding this onslaught on workers' rights, the actions of the Caterpillar workers and other groups of workers who fought for their jobs throughout this period were certainly an inspiration to young socially aware teenagers such as myself who were entering the world of work at that time of great change. The Caterpillar workers unfortunately did not change the decision of the company to pull out, but what they did achieve was a redundancy package that was well above what was being proposed. Now, a lot has changed in the intervening 30 years, but it is right that we should never give up on the concept of fair work and workers' rights that were at the core of the Caterpillar action. And since the establishment of the Scottish Parliament, we've had an opportunity to progress a fair work agenda. The Scottish Government considers trade unions to be partners, and my own experience as a divisional convener with Unison and the NHS is in working in partnership, not as opponents, and it is a much more productive relationship for all involved. The Scottish Government opposed the Trade Union Bill, which threatens the fundamental rights of workers to organise and bargain collectively, and if necessary, withdraw labour. And we should work to deliver responsible foreign investment to bring employers to the country and to further develop employee rights, which devolution of employment law would allow us to do. And we've repeatedly called for the devolution of employment law in order to ensure workers' rights are protected. And that is something that Labour have until now refused to support. In the light of current threats to these rights from ultra-right-wing Tory Brexiteer government, I would hope that Labour can alter its stance and support us in the call for these powers. That, I believe, would be a fitting tribute to those who have stood up for hard-won trade union rights over the years. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, I would like to wish Caterpillar Workers' Legacy Project well with their planned exhibition and other events planned this year to coincide with the anniversary of the occupation and which will commemorate the determination and solidarity of the Caterpillar workers. Thank you.
The last of the open speeches is Neil Findlay.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. I'd like to thank Richard Leonard for bringing this motion and important members' debate before Parliament and commend him for his speech. The occupation, just like British Leyland, the UCS, Timex, the miners' strike and others are ingrained in the DNA of the labour and trade union movement. These actions by workers in struggle, not for higher pay but for the right to work, and many, many more industrial struggles are not just our history and our heritage. They are absolutely relevant to the times we live in, where corporate power and all too often corporate greed have much more clout than the people or their democratically elected representative. As the Brexit debate rages, I hear people mouth platitudes about the apparent benefits that we all derive from the so-called free trade and the free movement of capital. Well, Caterpillar is but one example of the consequences of such policy. Time and again, we've witnessed multinational companies with production plants in Scotland and indeed across the UK, across the EU and indeed across the globe, taking that production to wherever they can maximise profit through low taxes, inducements or ever cheaper labour. The workforce left behind, discarded like a fitter's oily rag by corporate power brokers, financiers and the demands of shareholders. Only last week we saw Tesco announce closures and job losses. And what happened? Its share price shot up. What a brutal system capitalism is. And of course, in the circumstances, the Caterpillar workers found themselves, the only tool left in the locker of all working people is solidarity, is unity, organising together and loyalty to each other, to the community and to their class. And my friend, and a lot of us have mentioned people who we know, my friend Alec Cunningham, sadly no longer with us, was one of the young Caterpillar workers at the time. He spoke with great pride about the occupation, about the construction of the Pink Panther and the comradeship and solidarity of the occupation. And this debate is a tribute to him and all of his fellow workers alive or no longer with us. But ultimately, of course, the plant closed as the employers resorted to the courts to bring about the end of the occupation. But of course, it was not a failure. People have mentioned enhanced packages that were secured. But the success was also the international support, the finance and solidarity received from trade unions and working people across the world, and a community united in support of these men and women. A socialist icon once said, "It's better to die standing than to live on your knees." Well, the Caterpillar workers refused to live on their knees, and the current generation has much to learn from this and other such struggles, and I pay tribute to and express my solidarity with the shop stewards and others here today. Let their struggle be our generation's inspiration. But debates like this are not some dewy-eyed nostalgia trip. They're about the lessons of yesterday inspiring the actions of today. And ultimately, the aim is to bring about social, political and industrial change. That's the lesson from these events.
Now move to the closing speeches, and I call Jamie Hepburn. Around 7 minutes, please, Minister.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And can I join with others in thanking Richard Leonard for bringing this debate to the Chamber? I must admit I was a little surprised to learn it was his first members' debate. It shows the common frequency with which he participates in members' debates, Presiding Officer, because I think I come up, well, not against him, but in debate with him in members' debates with great regularity. But I would agree this is a very worthwhile and fitting subject for him to have brought as his first members' debate. And can I also welcome those who have come to Parliament to watch the debate and to participate in the reception that I know Richard Leonard has organised. I think it is absolutely right that we recognise this 30th anniversary as an important part of the history of industrial action in Scotland, as many have mentioned. I thought the turn of phrase that Neil Findlay used, it being woven into the DNA of the trade union and labour movement here in Scotland, it was a very apposite one. I would go further and say it's woven into the DNA of our country's history. Elaine Smith and others mentioned some of the other forms of industrial action we saw over the years leading up to and subsequent to the 30th anniversary, or subsequent to the action that we saw at Tanachside, such as the UCS work-in, the miners' strike. As a representative of a former mining community, as I know others in this chamber are, it behoves me to mention the miners' strike, the occupation of the Lees factory in Inverclyde, or indeed another example showing the wider impact in the wider world. We saw the workers in East Kilbride refusing to work on engines to be sent to Pinochet's Chile. All of these seminal events deserve their place as part of our country's history, a point that was picked up by Mr Greer. We heard today very clearly about the devastating impact of the Caterpillar decision. I think any of us in this chamber would understand and sympathise with the sense of betrayal that prompted the occupation. The actions of Caterpillar in 1987 dramatically changed people's lives, not just the workforce in Uddingston who had embarked on the 103-day fight for their jobs, but the wider community, their families. And we also heard of the widespread anger over a decision which had displayed scant regard for the impact on such individuals. This was not a failing plant. It was profitable with an exemplary and highly skilled workforce, and not the similar situation with the dismantling of British Steel's presence in Lanarkshire around the same period of time. As Richard Leonard set out, Caterpillar had themselves designated this plant as a plant with a future. Not only that, but they backed this up with an announcement of significant investment, some £62.5 million of investment to secure the plant's future, and they even persuaded the UK government to line up with them to announce this investment publicly, only for this decision to be quickly swept away. So as we look back some 30 years hence, it still remains unclear as to the specific rationale behind the decision to close a plant that was productive and profitable. The hopes of the workers were raised by the positive public announcements by the company and swept away by their subsequent actions. The hopes of the workers and their families may ultimately have been dashed, but their dignity and defiance must always be recognised. And so too must the actual difference they made. I think Neil Finlay and others made the point that whilst the ultimate desire of the occupation to keep the plant open was not to be realised, their action did and lead to enhanced packages for the workforce. So too must we learn from the experiences of the workers at Caterpillar and other industrial disputes down the years. This does have to inform our thinking for today. This government will not accept that such negative outcomes are inevitable and will always work to support and protect the workers' rights. We will also seek to intervene where we can, where any particular employer is in danger of ceasing operation, resulting in job losses. We've seen that with Ferguson's. We've seen that indeed with partnership with trade unions where we've helped safeguard jobs at DL, Clydebridge, Rio Tinto and Penman Engineering. I believe that is a positive example of where the collaboration of the government and trade unions, and indeed in conjunction with industry, where we can achieve real results. It is an indication of the value of trade unions, why James Kelly was correct to say trade unions matter. I believe today is a good opportunity to discuss the government's valued relationship with trade unions, underlined by our Memorandum of Understanding with the STUC, trade union membership of our Fair Work Convention. It was also crucial to delivering the Fair Work Framework published last year. Of course, the framework defines fair work as offering an effective voice, opportunity, security, fulfilment and respect. Fair work balances the rights and responsibilities of employers and workers and generates benefits for individuals, organisations and our society. The vision challenges not only businesses, employers, the public and third sectors, but has clear actions for unions and governments. Such partnership working is fundamental, and that's why we committed £500,000 this year to support the Convention's future work. We have, as an administration, repeatedly opposed the draconian measures put forward in the Tories' trade union bill, now Act which, unlike Mr Kerr, who I think made a misjudged contribution, I hate to stray from the usual form of consensus we have in these debates, Presiding Officer, but unlike Mr Kerr, I think it is absolutely apposite and appropriate for us to mention the Trade Union Act today, and it's why we will continue to raise our voice against that Act. And I would also say it's why we've not only set out £500,000 of support for the further rolling out the Fair Work Framework. It's why we've not only set out £2.26 million this year to support Scottish union learning, or £100,000 for equality and leadership projects, but also why we have invested and created a trade union modernisation fund to support trade unions to mitigate the effect of and to be able to better respond to the impact of the Trade Union Act. So I hope that's a demonstration, amongst other activities that inevitably I don't have the time to set out today, Presiding Officer, the great value in which the Scottish Government places in terms of our relationship with trade unions. But let me close by saying, and bring it back to the 30th anniversary, the Caterpillar occupation in 1987 is a marker in time that we must continue to seek to learn from. a period of profitable manufacturing in Uddingston was cruelly brought to an abrupt end. I would commend the efforts of those who were involved in the occupation. Welcome again to the Scottish Parliament. Absolutely like to reassure this chamber that as a government we will continue to work tirelessly to promote fair work and secure jobs for workers here in Scotland.
I now close this meeting, and any appreciation can now be shown.